Hello, my name is Dan Henry, and that was very moving, and so thank you very much, Paul. Appreciate it. Thank you, Marie. Thank you, Bob. I really appreciate being here on Akwan land, Taku Kwan, and Berners Bay people, so thank you very much. I'm from Haines, and I am a speech teacher. I teach rhetoric, and for this presentation, I think I'll kind of keep it short, but there are two elements of this. I am most interested in speech negotiation processes across culture. And it particularly applies in these situations because all the discussions that we've heard today even are negotiations, people talking to each other, trying to get their message across. And so I want to give this handout. You can hand this out, move this around. This came from a class that I taught a few years ago in Klukwan, and I'm really honored to see one of the students here. And we talked about the differences between Tlingit and non-Tlingit speech. And I was going to apply this to the packing culture for the gold rush, so we'll see if we have enough time to do this. But if you would just take a look at this, I think that there are some really interesting aspects that come out. And before I get into it, I want to thank especially Richard and Nora Downhour for setting me on this course. I talked to them probably 30 years ago at the Scollins House in Haines, and they were very interested in negotiation techniques and the exchange between non-native and native speakers. And so I want to give a special thanks to them. And also to Austin Hammond, who Paul mentioned, Donna Walk, who also encouraged me, and Joe Hotch as well, and a number of other people from the Chilkat and Chilkoot area. But as you look at this, before we get into it, I just want to give you a definition of rhetoric, because we hear that word rhetoric, and sometimes it's used pejoratively, sometimes it's used positively, not very often. And this is the definition. The definition that Aristotle gave of rhetoric is the art of using all available means to persuade. The art of using all available means to persuade. It's not a science. It is up to the individual. And there are protocols in cultures about how people persuade each other and how they talk to each other. And the three most important elements of rhetoric, the aspects of the way that we talk to each other that relate to that, are pathos, which is the emotional quality of the speech, logos, which are the facts and the information, and even most important, and this was a study that came up in 2002, the American Trial Lawyers Association, the most important of those elements is ethos, or the character of the speaker. Even more important than facts is the character of the speaker. And so when I look at Tlingit-Packer negotiations with non-natives in the 1890s, 1880s, I look at those three elements of persuasive material, ethos, pathos, and logos, and see how they are using it, and see how the non-natives are using it, and the Tlingit people especially with traditional protocols. So if we could just look at this handout that I gave you briefly, and I'm sorry there aren't enough to go around all together. If you'd like one, I can certainly email that to you. Just wanted to throw a few of these out. Now, these were all responses from Tlingit students. And one day in class, I said, you know, the next class we come in, I want you to talk about a difference, one difference between Tlingit speakers and non-native speakers. What's the difference in the style of speaking? And I was quite amazed and really impressed with what came up here. You can see yourselves here. In Tlingit, which is on that left-hand column, and Anglo elegance in own words. English is a polyglot language. I'll just run through these kind of quickly. In Tlingit, non-offensive and Anglo-defensive. And, you know, these are not necessarily scholars, and these are just people in the village who are talking about the way that we talk with each other. So I think there's real validity in this. When I showed this to Dick Dowenauer, he said that this could be developed into a standard, a set of standards for determining the rhetorical exchange between non-native and native people. So we were starting to work with this, and this is just the beginning of it. Hidden messages, somebody said, and straight messages. Lineage is important to the Tlingit, and Anglo stand alone. Tlingit, longer speeches, Anglo to the point. Not always the case. Could be the other way around. Tlingit, longer pauses before responding. Anglo, quick response. Tlingit, respect to the audience. Performance. Apology to those they may offend versus excuses. More indirect or direct. Moral histories as examples. Self, friends, or literal history as examples. Stay with issue. Digression and personality issues. Non-confrontational, confrontational. Less me talk. Talks about own experience. No notes. Uses paper. Slow and deliberate. Faster. Metaphor. Concrete. Upholds the group. Upholds the individual. And speech starts in the middle and linear. And once again, you know, these are not scholars, but I was quite amazed and very impressed with the elegance in the way that people set up these dichotomies. And truly, this gives us a start, a standard. A lot of these everybody knows, or most people know these things already. But to see them on paper and to know that these are real distinctions, rhetorical distinctions between people, I think is important. And it also reminds me of something that I've heard Joe Hotch and Kluckwan say many, many times, is that words are like a long stick. You never know who they will hit. And I think that says a lot about the importance of the meaning behind the words, understanding your audience, and understanding the message that you have to present to people. Using this model, I'm not going to really apply it in the short time that we have, and I was going to kind of look at some of the history of the Packers, particularly in Skagway, but also on the Chilkat side. I have some copies of this paper for those of you who are particularly interested in this. But I wanted to look at one speech delivered in 1887 by Tlingit. And Tlingit was the lieutenant to Danawak, or the second in charge, as you probably know. Some of you may know. I'm sure Paul knows. Whereas Danawak, the older headman in Yendastucky, was more interested in peace and working things out with the new stream of white men that came up there. Tlingit was more suspicious, and he was afraid that people were going to take away the land, which of course they did, or at least there was that negotiation going on. Well, the point at which a historical point at which Tlingit really had, I think, the upper hand, and where the United States government almost granted Tlingit's sole responsibility of the Chilkoot Trail. Almost, I say, because the next year federal court turned it around. But the U.S. Army recommended that the Tlingit Packers be in charge of the Chilkoot Trail and basically run it. It was not a toll road, but they would still be in charge of that. And the speech that Tlingit gave, I'll just read to you kind of, and just you can pick up on some of these ideas. This is his report to U.S. Lieutenant Alexander McCracken of the U.S. Army in 1887. McCracken had recommended that the Tlingit be in charge of the trail. And I wish there was time that I could apply all those rhetorical standards to this, but you've got the sheet and maybe you can take a look at that as well. Here's his speech though, and it was lawyerized, so it's not, and it was interpreted, so it's not going to sound like the original Tlingit, obviously. But he's talking about Mr. Healy, who owned the general store in Dai, who was creating some problems for the Tlingit packers. And he says, Mr. Healy wishes to take our road to the Yukon, which my tribe does not like, as we made it a long ago, and it's always been in my tribe. We fixed the road good so that the miners would not get hurt, and Mr. Healy is putting sticks or logs on it so that he can get pay for people going in over our trail, and we do not want to see that. When miners come here, I talk kindly to them, but some of them begin to swear, and then they say I began the quarrel. I always treat the miners kindly, and when they do their own packing, I tell them they had better let the Indians do their packing so the miners will not hurt themselves on the trail. And some of the miners tell me it is not my business, and that hurts my feelings. When the miners treat me right, I will and do treat them as my children. I am glad Mr. McCracken went over the trail with me to see our work. Not long ago, I was nearly killed by a white man, John Wilson, who has since gone to Juneau. John made Healy's house and then did packing over the trail. My tribe had borrowed lots of money from Healy, and we were going to make money by packing to repay Mr. Healy. We had arranged to pack for some miners when John Wilson rushed in and took one of the packs and said he was going to do the packing. John had been doing lots of packing, and I asked him kindly, saluting him at the same time, to please not pack this time, but let my men do so that they could get some money to repay Mr. Healy. John replied by calling me a blank, and then I called John the same name. John then rushed and took one of the miners' guns and wished to shoot me when the miners took their gun from John. These miners were very good friends of mine, and they said they were going to tell Captain Newell the real facts of the affair. George Carmack and a lot of my tribe saw this. When the miners go in, I would like them to arrange with me instead of the other men of my tribe so as to save time and misunderstanding, as the Indians come to me anyway as their headman. My tribe claims the winter trail over the Skagway River. We have 3 trails to the Yukon, and we claim all of them. I do not object to miners doing their own packing, but I hate to see them doing work they are not used to. I like to see white men such as George pack for the miners and have no objections to his packing. I have no objections to Stick, Chilkat, or any other Indian or white persons packing over our trails, but I and my tribe do object to Healy or other persons claiming our trails and monopolizing the packing. We used to get all the furs from the interior Indians, but now they trade with Mr. Healy or any person claiming our trails and monopolizing our packing. I asked $10 for a half pack to pay me for my general supervision and responsibility of the packing, as I feel myself bound to see every man and pack through safe. I have never asked or demanded toll from any person and will not do so. So that's a remarkable presentation, as you can hear. If you look at those 3 elements of rhetoric, ethos, pathos, and logos, certainly there was logos involved. He's saying Healy's putting sticks over the trail, logs on the trail to make us look bad, and so he's giving the facts of the case. He also establishes his ethos, his character, by establishing his leadership in the group and saying that people are going to come to him anyway, one way or the other. But most remarkable to me is that he has elements of pathos or emotional value in there. Right up front, he says, "This hurts my feelings." which you don't really hear politicians or headmen talking like this, but he knew that this would have a rhetorical effect on the U.S. government, is that not only was it illegal in his mind, but it also hurt the feelings and damaged the culture in that way. Once again, I want to thank the Anastasia before me and the presenters that I heard. I thought it was awesome, really enjoyed it. And I have copies of this paper and some of the notes, and I'd love to talk to people more about that. But Gunak Sheesh, thank you very much. Have a great conference.